Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Cool Wake Magic gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Beastmen against the forces of the Tomb Kings. And we are going with a, what I'm hoping is a decent build against the Beastmen without using Centaurs with throwing axes. And these have kind of become a staple of Tomb King builds, simply because they're one of the few counters you really have against big monsters like, say, Necrosphinx or Higher Titans and those sorts of things that you really kind of dominate the scene. So, for my Lord, I did decide to bring Morgar Shadowgave. This is a little bit risky because he does have regen, which means that a lot of the fire damage Tomb Kings can bring to the field can do more damage to him. But at the same time, he is still rather tanky. He does have regen. He does cause poison damage, and he does have those two summons of Chaos Spawn, which can be useful if you need to shut down enemy backlines a little bit, if you need to clear up infantry a little faster, and even if you just need to mob down enemy big units. They're a decent choice. Alongside him, I do have a Bray Shaman of the Wild on foot, and I think this is a pretty decent caster. He can improve your vigor and your charge bonus with Bestial Surge. He does have Vile Tide, which is of course a fairly cheap spell I brought. I decided to bring it in instead of Bray Scream because I found that it does a little more damage usually, even though it's a little more expensive, and it can help me proc Bestial Surge if I need it. I also did bring Devolve to deal with big blobs of enemy infantry. It's basically a super Flock of Doom, and then Mantle of Ghorok, which is a cool little mix of Wa and Occam's Mind Razor, except it only affects one target and does debuff their armor by a bit. But when you cast it on a unit like, say, Minotaurs with Grey Weapons, it turns them into absolutely unstoppable killing machines. And obviously, they don't have much armor to begin with, so the armor loss doesn't really matter. For my front line, I do have a bunch of Bestigors, 3 units of them, which is enough to hack and slash their way through just about anything the Tomb Kings can put on the field. They are backed by 2 units of Ungor Spears just to cover the flanks. And then we do have some Centaurs with great weapons, as well as Warhounds with poison out on each flank. And the Centaurs with great weapons I think are really pretty important, just because they bring AP that can kind of chop through some of the more heavily armored constructs. And back 2 units of Minotaurs with great weapons are really my hope, or my main counter here to big stuff, to big constructs. Now, my opponent actually caught me a little bit by surprise here because he decided not to go with one of those more conventional Necrosphinx and Higher Titan builds. Instead, he did bring High Queen Khalida over here. She's, of course, a very potent melee combatant. She has really good stats just overall: 65, 60 melee attack, melee defense, 90 armor, 4,000 HP, weapon strength of 450, and it's armor piercing. And of course, she does have the usual My Will Be Done. She does have Venom Wave, which is a nice little explosion AoE. Tomb Strike, which is a self buff that allows her to cause terror. And of course, Blessing of Asaph, which is an interesting choice. It's very powerful for archers that are nearby. So if she was more nearby with her Ushapti and her archer blob here, she'd be giving him a very big buff. For his front line, my opponent decided to bring the Kepra Guard on one flank, backed by 4 units of Tomb Guard with halberds. And this is an interesting choice, but these guys do have very big melee defense, and they do have decent enough melee attack combined with armor piercing. So against Bestigors, despite being a bit cheaper, they'll still trade pretty effectively. And of course, they can bog down the big Beastmen units pretty effectively. Behind that, my opponent does have 3 units of Ushapti Greatbow, so these guys can definitely lay the hurt down on any of my large units. You can see already my Centaurs are taking a nasty beating. I've already lost 5 models over here, and taking some nasty HP damage on this unit over there. And my opponent also does have the Blessed Legion of Demonetization and the Skeleton Archers backing up the Ushapti Greatbows. And these guys, of course, could rain absolute death and destruction onto my Minotaurs with great weapons. Finally, hidden here in the trees, my opponent does have a Scorpion, and I only catch it now, like as I was pushing past, and decide to engage immediately with the Centaurs. The Centaurs should trade pretty effectively against this unit. They do have immunity to psychology as long as their leadership's over 50%, and they do have that armor piercing. With the help of the hounds, they'll have poison applied to the Tomb Scorpion, and they can kind of chip away at it and destroy it pretty quickly. And of course, it doesn't have the best of melee defense, and it doesn't have a bonus against large, so they can tear through it pretty effectively. Nonetheless, you can see those archers getting into position. Over here, I try to get hounds into the Blessed Legion, and they do manage to kind of skim past the High Queen and get on top of these the Blessed Legion here. Definitely a good little attack for me. Though you can see the Centaurs over here have lost about 1/3 of their strength to the fire from the enemy shooting. And things just keep getting worse, basically, with the Ushapti able to pivot and fire. Over here, these Minotaurs did take a pounding from the Ushapti, but now they are still at 10 models, and they're going to plow into the Tomb Scorpion and put it into the dirt, even as these Centaurs shift target and dive into the Skeleton Archers. On the flanks over here, you can see the cheap Ungor Spears are tying down the Kepra Guard, which is a good little cost-effective method of countering them. While over here, the Tomb Guard are being kind of run down by the Bestigors and by the Bray Shaman, and of course Morgar. While over here, summons of Chaos Spawn are going down, and these guys should be able to help mop up the infantry blobs, or the infantry archers. Obviously, my hounds are getting routed off because of their atrocious leadership. But over here, you can see the Minotaurs with a Mantle of Ghorok are just taking High Queen Kalita to Pound Town, and she's just getting annihilated. These guys have 132 weapon strength right now. These obviously have their built-in bonus against large, and you can see she's just getting destroyed. She's lost about 2/3 of her HP in a matter of seconds, and those Minotaurs are just doing some immense damage. Really, there's no way to describe it otherwise. They're just destructive, a force of nature. You can see now with the Shopti with great bows do try to block them, but they are going to get wrecked in turn. It's really not their day, and you can see they're losing model after model to those Minotaurs. On the other flank, in the meantime, the Minotaurs are picking apart these Tomb Scorpions. The Tomb Scorpion, which did manage to tear out the poor Ungor spears here. One of the big problems is that Kepler Guard is actually a decent choice even against Minotaurs, just because they have pretty high weapon strength, and Minotaurs with great weapons especially don't have the best melee stats. That said, over here, the Ushapti Great Bows are getting shut down by the 2 units of Chaos Spawn. Chaos Spawn obviously not intended for these sorts of fights, but they do have good weapon strength, so they can kind of do the job. Over here, the Centaurs are going to get routed off by High Queen Kalita and the Ushapti Great Bows, but the Minotaurs are hot in pursuit, and they are going to crush these Ushapti just like they've crumped all those Ushapti before them. You can see they've already gained 2 chevrons, and they're well on their way to their 3rd. Over here, Hounds are crushing the Blessed Legion. Some of these Centaurs are rallying, and you can see the Tomb Guard are slowly but surely getting torn apart by the Bestigors and by Morgr, the Shadow Gave. Over here, you can see they're finally collapsing. I did manage to get the Chaos Spawn into the Kepler Guard, which is a much better fight for them. And yeah, the Minotaurs are shutting down that large support, and things are definitely kind of wrapping up rather quickly for my opponent. Things definitely kind of got out of hand pretty quickly there. Had my opponent brought a more heavy-oriented build, you often see one of those more Necrosphinx or higher Titan-oriented build. It would have definitely presented a much bigger problem for me. And I think, because the fear and terror from those constructs, as well as the fact that they're a little harder to shut down, would have been definitely been a little bit of a problem. Nonetheless, the Minotaurs with great weapons are just such a force of nature against these big units. They can surround them with the pop Mantle of Ghorok on them. They have such monstrous melee attack. They can really land a good number of hits and just tear units apart in a matter of seconds. Obviously, if you take big units, you have to drop down the quality of your front line, which means the Bestigors will be much more effective against it. Because usually you'll want to bring your Shopti Great Bows regardless, because you do need them to zone away potential. You need either Shopti Great Bows or Skeleton Archers, but usually your Shopti Great Bows, just because of their flexibility and ability to run away and kite, will be the ones that are brought onto the field. So if you decide to bring more big monsters, you are forced to sacrifice that powerful front line. And that really opens the way for these Bestigors to steamroller your front line and open the possibility for the Minotaurs to surround and monkey stomp your back line. So definitely the Minotaurs are just such a force of nature. I do think that obviously if your opponent is able to kind of bait you on top of their infantry with their Necrosphinx or units like that, if they get you into a unit of Skeleton Spears, then you'll really be in deep trouble with your Minotaurs. But as long as you micro properly and play things a little safe, they can definitely do a good job. And of course, Morgr with his Chaos Spawn summons can kind of muck up your opponent's backline a little bit, muck up those Ushapti Great Bows, provide an opportunity really for your infantry to win that fight, for your Minotaurs to do some work. And yeah, nonetheless, I do think this is a pretty solid build without bringing shooting. Obviously, Centaurs with throwing axes are still a very good choice, and I wouldn't dissuade anybody from you bringing them. But yeah, in general, I think this is pretty solid. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments or criticisms, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.